Hi, everyone. Couple of bits of updates to go through. So pretty much still on the same message, though, from the previous videos, talking about horrible content getting uploaded into the blockchain. And it really does come down, what the pushback you constantly hear is, it's already possible, we can already do this. And I'm saying not in a sanctioned way, and I think that is really where the biting point of the argument I'm making is, everything that's being put into the chain at the moment, if they have to go through out-of-band channels to do it, then they have to ask some giant miner specifically for permission, and then the miner checks out what it is because they don't want to be on the hook for it. And I asked in a Spaces at least, Portland, the guy who runs Slipstream for Mara, do you guys moderate the content of what you include? And he refused to respond. And from that, I'll take the inference or the implication, at least, that of course they moderate. I don't think Mara wants to be on the hook for uploading CSAM to the blockchain. That would be ridiculous of them. I don't like the fact that they have Slipstream in the first place, but at least they recognize the responsibility they have in what they put in the chain. But then therein lies the hypocrisy, right? If a giant miner is prepared to say, I will go around what the nodes relay on the network and include stuff I can include out of band and solicit out of band. But we have a massive problem with nodes doing that, right? There's the hypocrisy of it. As a node, I have similarly no interest in having objectionable stuff on my computer in my house. But apparently, according to everyone in core, should I exercise any sort of discretion about what I download and store and relay with my node, then I'm censoring Bitcoin and I'm undermining its censorship resistance. It's a ridiculous position, but no one is kicking up a fuss about the fact that Mara will moderate what they allow in Slipstream. Of course, I'm guessing that they moderate, but if they don't, I think they'd be crazy because someone could come along and get them in a lot of trouble. The other thing that really I didn't expect, again, I made the argument last week. I made the argument and I was very theoretical about it. I talked from a philosophical angle. I'm saying we're trying to shoehorn in a new narrative. Initially, we were saying all transactions are equal. And now by virtue of that and adding arbitrary data into it and not allowing ourselves any ability to keep that to an extreme minimum, we're now saying all data is just ones and zeros instead of all transactions and all UTXOs are equal and 1 Bitcoin equals 1 Bitcoin. And I was saying the world will just about let us make the claim that money is fungible and we can't be judging whether some UTXOs are good or bad. There's already a bunch of that anyway with KYC and things like that, but that was a battle I was willing to fight. And the battle I am not willing to fight is saying all data is equal. And if the chain is filled up with CSAM or malware, then that's no different to if it was filled up with transaction history or, archives of WikiLeaks or Wikipedia or whatever, like good data that belongs in the public record. I'm not going to say they're equivalent. They're just not. Some data is horrible, and I'm not going to defend that. But here's the thing. I was philosophical about it, and I was being, abstract, theoretical. But then, right after I make that argument, someone does a little bit of digging, and it turns out BSV, which is a fork of Bitcoin, and I had no idea about this. Obviously, I know about Craig Wright's fork of Bitcoin Cash, which was a fork of Bitcoin itself. Of course I knew all about that, but I didn't realize that it's staring us right in the face. BSV, they blew out data carrier size the exact same way, made op return 100,000 bytes, the exact same amount Core are about to do, and the minute they did it, the chain was filled up with CSAM. Like, exactly the argument I've been making, and I had no idea that this has actually happened in the real world. I was just looking at it from a theoretical standpoint. There's a lot of incentive to take Bitcoin out. And if we're going to be relaying around large amounts of arbitrary data that gets stored in Bitcoin in a serialized format, isn't that just asking for trouble? Oh, it turns out if you do this, that's what happens. It's already there. It's already established. Now, the response to that was, well, did it create any problems for BSV? First off, I don't care if it created problems for them or not. is wrong and preventable. And they only got it when they made the exact same change that's being made to Bitcoin. And second off, no one cares about BSV. It doesn't have the potential to take out the global banking cartel and undermine central banking. It doesn't have the potential to do that. There's no incentive to take it out. It's completely centralized and controllable anyway. Bitcoin, however, there's a lot of incentive to take that out. And, change the code was the campaign, trying to make it work in a worse way. And that's what's being done by the people we trust. So the fact that we have that case study there means it's case closed. And it's very frustrating that I'm saying, guys, this is not a theoretical argument anymore. I'm telling you, someone else did on a fork of Bitcoin, i.e. something that's basically Bitcoin, inherits all its code from what Bitcoin is, did the exact same change to the same number from 80 bytes all the way up to 100,000 bytes. Someone did that and then had this exact thing I've been saying was going to happen. So it's not, you can argue theoretically with me, although it was already possible. All of your theoretical arguments are null and void. If we have a real-world practical case study of it where it happened, that should be enough for anyone to say, yeah, this is a reckless idea and we shouldn't do it. And the fact that people are still saying, I'm just going to go with Bitcoin Core on this, tells me that people are just trusting the science too much on this. Rather than being scientists, they're trusting other people to have been scientists who are failing at that job. And it doesn't stop there. Namecoin had exactly the same thing happen. I don't know how well known this has happened, but someone reached out to me and explained it to me. Namecoin got flooded with CSAM, and the community there didn't react to it in a way that showed that they had an actual problem with it. And the person I know that was involved in Namecoin back then rage dumped all of it. And that's the kind of thing you'd see happen with Bitcoin. If you watch us have this stupid philosophical attitude saying, oh, all data is just ones and zeros, watching and waving everything through when it's clearly objectionable material, nothing to do with money, nothing to do with ending fiat, nothing to do with ending the Fed, nothing like that. It's just a bunch of disgusting people who are solving the fact that they have a horrible thing to do outside the law and they can get other people to host their junk for them instead of trying to buy hosting without revealing their identity because they don't want to get caught. Just get Bitcoin nodes to host it for you. Problem solved. This is what we're allowing here. And these people, I don't believe... There's been a lot of horrible allegations against people made, particularly against me for bringing this up, and I'm going to go into that more in a minute. But I'm not accusing anyone on the pro-massive op return side of being someone that would indulge in this kind of stuff. I'm saying they're naive to it. I'm saying there are people out there that want to do horrible stuff like that, and they want to take advantage of the Bitcoin network's naivety and encumber them with the burden of having to tell the world, sorry, neutral money requires that we treat all data as ones and zeros and we be as permissive as it is possible because there are some theoretical concerns around mining centralization and block propagation. I'm telling you, no one is going to buy that. It will be reputational death for us. It is an act of suicide allowing this to come through. So yeah, that was Namecoin. And I stand by what I just said there. I'm not accusing anyone on the pro-massive op return side of being that kind of sexual deviant. I'm aware those allegations have been made. But on the flip side, everything is now getting thrown personally at me, and I guess Luke as well, but I mean, he just kind of gets attacked all day, every day anyway. But everyone is they're immediately going, someone's talking about CSAM and Bitcoin, therefore they're a Fed. And I'm trying to do this in a preventative capacity. I'm saying that the state of the blockchain at the moment is absolutely fine. People have done stupid things and put trolling content inside Bitcoin's blockchain, but I will defend it in its current state because we don't solicit any of this stuff. Bitcoin doesn't officially support data carrying beyond 80 bytes of op return. Everything else is hacked. The inscriptions approach is just a hack of Taproot. That wasn't how any of this was supposed to work. We can look the world in the eye and say, this is not the intended use case of Bitcoin. We don't sanction it. These people are abusing the system, and we try and create burdens for them and create hurdles along the way. That's what we've been trying to do, and that's been the name of the game for a couple of years now. Rolling out the red carpet and saying, here you go, store 100,000 contiguous bytes of data. It's just completely, utterly drunk-driven as an approach. I can't begin to tell you how misguided it is. You're going to have people upload malware into Bitcoin's blockchain in one contiguous chunk, and that's going to trigger antivirus software. All of the security stuff that runs, anyone running a node in the cloud is going to have the VPS provider say, we just flagged something malicious, and shut down your server or quarantine it or whatever. That's going to happen to every single node in the cloud immediately. It can't happen with the current methods that are exactly the same anyway, so what difference does it make? That's the difference. Because I can't maliciously put content in the blockchain that necessarily needs to be a lot more than 500 bytes or whatever the smallest amount of malware is. I can't just put that in the blockchain and have it trigger stuff which knocks 25% of the network offline that's running inside the cloud. I can't do that at the moment. I'd have to liaise with a miner to go out of band because no one has giant op returns being relayed yet. And then the miner's going to look at what it is and say, this is nonsense. I'm not putting it in the chain. I'd be liable for taking out a quarter of the network. Do you understand? This is just completely and utterly reckless. You're just going to knock thousands of nodes offline. And then we're going to have to ask ourselves, do we hard fork to get this crap out? Do we whitelist malware do we get Amazon Web Server and Microsoft Azure and DigitalOcean? Do we get them to start whitelisting malware if it's in a Bitcoin context? Are you nuts? Why are you bringing this upon us? What kind of disruption is this going to beget? What kind of benefit does that kind of disruption bring about? It's not going to help with anything. It's just going to make everything look incompetent and like we just have idiots at the helm of this thing. It's going to be such an embarrassment. And I can't begin to tell you, like, it's not a theoretical concern. That is guaranteed to happen. And I can't have a mature conversation about it. The minute I released my videos last week, everyone on the other side is just saying, why are you talking about CSAM? You know so much about it. You must be guilty of it yourself. They're really doing the he who smelt it dealt it, teenage freaking 11-year-old boys at high school level of argumentation. And I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I think people are being naive and allowing a Trojan horse change into Bitcoin that they haven't fully grasped the consequences of because they're incompetent. I will stand by that statement. That is not an accusation. That is not a death threat. Do you understand? Whereas the stuff that's getting thrown at me is ridiculous. And people are so tempted to just look at an argument like this and say, well, Adam Back has said it, Peter Todd has said it, and I'm just so appalled by their idiocy. The idea that you can't get in front of an obvious impending disaster with known case studies in the past where you're almost guaranteed for the exact same thing to go wrong in Bitcoin, but for it to be way more terrible consequences. The fact that you're inviting that, and I can't say this is a problem without them going, oh, it's all your fault. Shooting the messenger. If it happens now, it's my fault, according to these guys. According to Adam Back and Peter Todd, the fact that I brought this up means no one would have thought of it until I brought it up. But now that I brought it up, when it happens, it's going to be my fault because no one would have thought of it either, despite it having happened to blockchains in the past. I'm so appalled by the dishonesty of that as an argument. These are like, we're talking about Adam Back and Peter Todd. These are people I really, really looked up to and respected for half of my adult life. And I get to see them make stupid arguments like that. It's so utterly disappointing, guys. I'm sure you can imagine how disappointing that is. We had the block size war. These people were champions during that period. They said they had high integrity. They argued. They stuck to the truth. And maybe I was blinded to them not doing that because I just agreed with them in principle anyway. I'm not immune to that. But yeah, seeing them make these stupid arguments. Adam in private has said a lot of much worse things to me than he has in public. But in public, still, he has said, have a bit of common sense, mate. Don't bring up the CSAM argument because you're just gonna red flag everything. Everyone's gonna start looking for it. Yeah, I understand that is a trade-off. But at the same time, saying nothing about it and watching it happen isn't a real solution. I'm trying to have an internal conversation with, obviously, a very public but very internal conversation with other Bitcoiners who presumably care about the system and know that we can't deal with that kind of reputational fallout. We've had so much stuff thrown at us. It's bad for the environment, FUD, and the terrorist financing and all that stuff. We've dealt with so much slander over the years. I'm not going to take on a battle that is suddenly an order of magnitude more difficult to defend because my heart even wouldn't be in it. Yeah, sorry, the Bitcoin network, its participants all got tricked by incompetent developers into thinking they had to start relaying 1,000 times the size. Arbitrary data. They had to officially bless massive chunks of data getting stored in the blockchain. We have no defense at that point, none whatsoever. I'm not going to want to defend Bitcoin anymore. I will defend it consuming gigawatts of electricity. I will defend that. I will defend people buying things and engaging in commercial activity that I think is immoral. I will defend that being inside and making use of a neutral money. I'm not going to defend the idea that everyone has to run a cloud storage, an unmoderated cloud storage server in their house to make this thing happen, because I know that that's not true. I know that we've never needed that. So, yeah, there's been a lot of just shame. Like, it's getting worse and worse. The tone of the debate is getting worse and worse. I got asked to debate Shinobi again. I said, yeah, why not? I figure it would just be 2 hours of him hurling obscenities at me and then like watching another 1% of the network switch to knots. Like, he's been, to be fair, an inadvertent but fantastic champion of knots, because people, judge core by the caliber of their supporters, and they're obviously just awful people. So, but I'm just looking at endless screenshots people send me of abusive message after abusive message, and then him and Mr. Hoddle dug up some tweet of mine from years ago where I said the majority of what's labeled as CSAM is 14-year-olds sexting each other on apps like Snapchat and stuff like that. And they get in trouble for it, and they get criminal records, sometimes tried as adults, things like that, when it's not what you think. Whereas the actual real evil stuff, the Epstein stuff, but way beyond that, of course, the really, really dark stuff that goes on. Of course, that's not part of any statistic you might look at. That stuff gets swept under the rug, and if you go to the authorities about it, it gets squashed by the time it reaches sufficient heights. And, people start covering their own ass. That's my point in that statement. And they start throwing it at, like, my other half. I got kids, guys. I've got kids. They're starting school last week and this week. We got better things to do than, like, trolls from the core side trying to drag my family into scandal about CSAM because I brought it up, the fact that I'm concerned about it making its way into Bitcoin. And so many people are just using that to Fed jacket me, is that the term? To describe me as someone that's obviously a Fed because I'm trying to stir up controversy, and I've made people dislike core by pointing out what they've done. And I reject this. This has been the main rationale they use for these below-the-belt tactics has been, well, you started it, and core are getting death threats because of you, and people are, making violent threats or whatever, or people are angry and the temperature's high and it's all my fault. No, fundamentally, the reason people are angry with core, even if some people take it far too far and start making death threats and stuff like that, yes, it is too far to do stuff like that, but the reason they're angry is because of core's actions, not because I pointed out what core's actions are, or I deciphered them and explained them to people that might not have been able to properly assess what it is they were doing. And I'm going to stand by that, and I'm not going to be made to jump through hoops by people telling me I have to apologize for what some anonymous guy wrote to some core developer. It's nothing to do with me, okay? If people can't take responsibility for their own voices, that's on them. It's nothing to do with me. If they take it too far, then they are taking it too far. And I've said this before, I'll say it again. And I'm not going to be able to jump through stupid hoops because this is not that much of a political battle. I'm not going to be told I have to denounce violence, and I must denounce the people making death threats, and I'm not doing it. It's just virtue signaling nonsense. People people sending, keyboard warriors doing keyboard warrior style things is cringe and stupid. The people I have, harassing my wife and doing stuff like that, I know them personally and they know me personally. So it crosses a line. It becomes very different at that point. Anyway, that is an update. It's been a very annoying week, frankly. But we had some back and forth with Adam. Adam's been incredibly stupid on this spam debate. He's been, like I said, he's been very disappointing. He came out with something saying Bitcoin is money and devs need consensus if they're going to change stuff that makes Bitcoin materially different. And we were all like, yay, Adam's back. But, that was fun for 5 minutes. But he's not. He really doesn't have a clue what he's talking about in this debate. And it's, of course, really hard to write off someone like that because of his legend status. His legend status is secured by both having come up with Hashcash, i.e. what turned into Bitcoin, and the Perl script that enabled people to flout the NSA en masse with email signatures, exporting against the rules, public key cryptography. Like, this was just, Adam's a legend for that stuff. But this was the 80s and the 90s. Nowadays, as Simon Dixon says, he's someone pushing Bitcoin treasury stocks. He's not a cypherpunk anymore, and he doesn't have a clue what he's talking about in the spam debate. And his input in it has been very frustrating because he's someone I have to constantly treat like they have an important and insightful thing to offer in the debate, and he just doesn't. He's just not who I once knew. And some of this I'm saying because I have personal conversations with him as well, that aren't in the public sphere, like people arguing on Twitter. And I'm just really disappointed. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this week. I'm trying to sort of step away from it, but I think I'll round it off by making some predictions because I think. We're like 4 weeks away from Core 30 now, and 80% of the network is still running it. So it's going to happen. It's going to be adopted. People are going to have 100,000 bytes op return. And I think mining pools are not that naive. I think they have seen the controversy. At least, the English-speaking world has. The Chinese pools, I can imagine. Mark, the company president of Ocean, was just over in China, and I asked him, he was there with a translator speaking to all the top brass of Bitcoin over there, and no one brought up spam, no one brought up core versus nods, nothing. This is a very English-speaking Twitter-based bubble that is concerned with this whole thing. So they will probably just sail right in. And they will start, I would imagine Antpool will start naively uploading 100,000 chunks of malware and pornography into the chain without even thinking about it. And I imagine that will very quickly set off alerts, and all of the infrastructure for Bitcoin that runs in the cloud, when it verifies those transactions in its decrypted state, will trigger all of the safeguards that VPSs have. And that will knock a bunch of nodes offline with no obvious solution for how to resolve it. That's just unbelievable to me, and I would infinitely prefer it if Core would revert the change rather than me be able to say I told you so. But it seems like we really are just driving off a cliff, and they've removed the steering wheel from the car, and now they're just looking me in the eye saying, "What are you going to do?" And I'm like, right, well, I guess I'm going off the cliff with you then. Like, I've told you it was a stupid idea, and now we can be in a wreck at the bottom of a cliff together with me, my lifeless corpse trying to mutter the words "I told you so." Like, this is unbelievable. I can't believe it. I really can't. So yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching. I'll do another update soon. Oh yeah, wait. When that happens, what's going to happen after that? I think you'll see I don't think you'll suddenly see people all ditch Core and run NOTs, because unfortunately NOTs nodes are going to be taken out by this too. So it's not like all the Core nodes go down because of Core's idiocy. No, Bitcoin itself has a massive, horrible headache one day when a bunch of infrastructure goes offline. all of the giant entities in the Bitcoin space that need nodes to do what they do run nodes in the cloud. Sometimes just as failover and resiliency and redundancy rather, but other times that's the entire way they run their infrastructure, entirely in AWS or Azure or DigitalOcean or one of the other big VPSs. I expect a lot of aggravation will be thrown about. I think some people have, like Peter Todd, trying to set the stage that this was ultimately my fault for raising this concern and giving someone the idea is laughable. I don't think anyone's actually going to buy that, though respect to him for trying that disgusting tactic. But I think people are going to go, well, this was on a 100,000 byte op return. It just crashed 20% of the nodes on the network, and with no obvious way for us to resolve that. I think people are going to lay the blame where that belongs at Bitcoin Core, but I don't think that means a bunch of Core supporters are suddenly going to start running knots. All the people that hate knots will continue to hate knots because that's just how people work. But I think you'll see people that were moderate about it, that have tried to stay objective and unemotional about the whole thing will go, it looks like Luke was right. That will be about the 8th time that's happened in Bitcoin's history, that it was everyone against Luke and Luke ended up being right. I think that will probably happen, and there'll be discussion around what we do to prevent this stuff. Some people will propose a hard fork to get the crappy data out, which is a nightmare that I don't want to deal with. Others will start proposing that we work with all of the VPSs and even Microsoft Windows and like Defender and all these things, any antivirus software running on any consumer hardware or consumer operating system that flags this stuff will need to either whitelist it to help Bitcoin out, or Bitcoin will have to adapt somehow. Soft forking isn't going to do anything. I don't think there's a remedy for that as a soft fork. A hard fork fixes it, but hard forks are basically impossible, even for something as cataclysmic as that. Some people will propose a soft fork to stop it from happening again, i.e. limit op return at the consensus level so that it can never happen. I don't think that will be successful because people will keep making this stupid point that it's already possible without op return. You just put it in some other non-contiguous format, and that's not, like I've been saying, there are contiguous ways, I believe, to put arbitrary data in Bitcoin that aren't op return. But so that's why like forking this out preemptively, as some people have been pushing me to start pushing for, is not a viable solution for me. The main issue is that we'd be sanctioning it. And that's a problem. Just saying we support this, we endorse this, we are going to actively solicit arbitrary data storage in Bitcoin. That to me just says Bitcoin, people look at Bitcoin, what happened to you guys? Why is there malware? Why is there ransomware? Why is there pornography in the chain en masse suddenly? I don't want to have to respond to them and say, because we decided to allow it. I don't want to have to stand up and say that. There's no recovering from that. And it's not the case. I'm not going to, even if I put it in a barrier that stops most of it, I want to be able to tell the world about the barrier. I don't want to be able to tell the world I removed it, knowing full well what would happen. And I don't want to get into hair-splitting discussions about how effective the barriers are. If they work a bit, I want them. If they work a lot, I really want them. If they work 99% effectively, which op return, data carrier size does, then perfect. I want that. It's about as good as you could possibly hope for, without forking every single time something you don't like starts happening. That's just not practical, and we can defend not doing that. So carry on with precedent. Carry on filtering out crap, minimizing it, creating obstacles for these people, having them go elsewhere, and generally being able to stand up to the world and say, hey, this is a monetary network. We treat all transactions as equal, and we treat stuff that isn't transactions with extreme hostility. There's nothing inconsistent about that. Anyway, yeah, those are my predictions for what happens. I think it's going to be a bloody mess, to be honest with you, when Core 30's been out for a couple of months, and there start to be some giant op return using things, and you have Antpool just including them because it doesn't pay any attention to all the controversy we're kicking up. So I think I don't really know what the resolution for it is. I'm sure we'll be fine, and I'm sure there are going to be things that no one expected. But I do know that when it hits the fan, Core needs to take responsibility for it, and I'm pretty sure most people are going to point the finger where it belongs rather than at me for bringing up the potential issue, which is, again, ridiculous. So thanks for watching. Have a good night.